Another Way is Possible is a community-powered podcast from the Nina Collective, exploring what it means to co-create a racially equitable future rooted in belonging, justice, and co-liberation. Each episode invites listeners into the kind of dialogue that sparks change from the inside out. I want to lift up the work of the Joy Doctrine, and you heard a little bit of that on the last podcast. And this idea that we're not talking about just happiness, we're really talking about radical joy that comes together with justice, right? That we're not talking about two separate things. And 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 then, in our space of rebuilding and imagining like what's possible and sustainable, like what is the place that joy has or potentially will have when we're talking about rebuilding?
Oh, it's everything. I even think about our everyday, right? You know, it's it's interesting. I think about joy like scientists think about the sun. And so when you're thinking about Earth and how things happen on Earth, like we have food to eat because there are plants and if folks eat animals, there are animals who eat the plants and that nurtures our food source, right? We have oxygen because the plants give it up and the photosynthesis from the sun. So like everything, the sun is like the battery, right? When we think about the living ecosystem on this planet, the sun is the battery. And I think for our souls and our spirits and our energies, joy is the battery. All right. And so joy functions in a lot of different ways. So you can't say that the sun only has one function because it has many when we think about the health of the planet. And so we can't say that joy has only one function. It has many in the health of our spirits. And so when I'm thinking about, anywhere from how do we find the energy to keep going when things are difficult? That's joy, right? How do we find the space to be with one another when our schedules and our calendars are full? That's joy, right? When I think about even how do I recreate that wonderful meal that I ate last Tuesday, even that's joy, right? And so the answer to so many of the things that elude us is joy. And like you said, joy doesn't look like empty happiness sometimes. Sometimes joy is, like today, I wanted to really, really sit in a chair today. I was just like, there was this chair outside that I really wanted to sit in. And I wanted to just be still for a while. And, you could casually look and be like, oh, there's this guy sitting in this chair being still with his headphones on. That doesn't look like, the kind of happiness that you see in movies or on Hallmark cards. But for me today, that was my joy, right? There was there's this thing that happens in the school cafeteria sometimes when I go pick the kids up from lunch, where the kids will play their music and they'll be like dancing in the corner of the cafeteria. And so I make it a point sometimes to cut my lunch short. And teacher lunch is already short, but I make it a point sometimes to cut my lunch short just to go down and experience their joy. Right. And so sometimes I'm even stressed during a school day and cutting my lunch short doesn't look like joy on the surface, but then being able to witness students in their final 6 or 8 minutes of lunch and watching them dance and listen to music kind of gives me a battery for the second half of my school day. And so people look at me all the time. They're like, oh, you only took lunch for 20 minutes. You went back and you met the students. You should take your full lunch. And I'm like, well, no, taking the 6 minutes to watch them and so really kind of being able to identify what is the thing that fuels me? What is the thing that gives me energy when things are hard? What is the thing that allows me to make a deeper connection with the folks around me? All of those things are joy. Yeah. And Fernando, this idea of small moments, like, I think one of the things that consumer culture has done is they have attempted to package joy and sell it to us, right? So they say joy is only a cruise if you pay me $2,000, right? Joy is only a vacation if you can afford to come to this exclusive resort, right? But our people been inventing joy since the beginning, right? Like joy was, let me take these discarded Civil War instruments and create jazz, right? Joy is like, let me take the worst food that the plantation owner gives me and create cornbread, right? Like joy is all of these like things that we did with very little, right? And so I'm really thinking about how we return to that ethos.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
I wanted to riff on that and actually bring our ancestors to this space, to this conversation. Well, to the space they're already here, but to this
Uh-huh.
conversation. Because about a year ago, um, you and I had a conversation, and I remember clearly it was as it was yesterday. Um, this was a time that a lot of my meetings happened in a bathtub because that was really I needed to be in the water. I'm a person from the water. I needed to be in the water to have some hard conversations because my whole work and the work of many other Black women that came before me were being just eliminated completely.
Mhm.
And I had to tell you that we weren't going to be able to continue our project.
Mhm.
And I had to be like sad about me, sad about you, sad about
Yeah.
us, and
Yeah.
to be, quote unquote, professional. We were still getting to know
Mhm.
each other. And you really brought me to tears and also brought
Yeah.
and reminded me, right? And I think
Yeah.
that some of this work is the remembering of
Mhm.
what our ancestors have
Yeah.
given to us and carved for us. And how do I connect my own practice
Mhm.
on ancestral alignment
Yeah.
to be ready for this moment? Can
Mhm.
you talk to us a little bit about us? Like, what is the we got this from both an individual, collective, present perspective, but also the ancestral power that we got this has a possibility to have.
Yeah, so that's what I named my book. But before it even was what I wanted to name my book, it was um what my I have one of my favorite aunts is my mom's younger sister. My mom's youngest sister is just a few years older than me, so she's almost like a sister to me, even though she is my aunt. And I remember she would only come to visit on special occasions, family holidays and things like that. And there was some time she came to visit. I don't remember which holiday we were celebrating, but I was going through a hard time at school, and she's the kind of aunt where when something bad is happening, I could tell her. I couldn't always tell my mother, but I could tell my aunt, and we thank the creator for those aunts in the world. And so I told my aunt, I was like, I'm going through, and I can't remember, it was some teenage hardship I was going through, but I'm going through this severe teenage hardship, and I'm certain my life is over because of it. And she just looked at me and she said, do you think you're the first one of us to ever endure something difficult? She's like, you come from a long line of grandmothers and great grandmothers who have made art of difficult things. And that just recentered me. And then she talked about like my own grandmother. She's like, did you know that your own grandmother has done this thing before? And did you know that her grandmother before her has done this thing before? And so this thing that you're struggling with, it's in your bones, like it's in your DNA, like you know how to do it. You just have to work on remembering how to do it, and you have to position yourself around people who can help you remember how to do it. But this thing that you're doing, this hard thing that you can't face, that you believe will kill you, has been done before and has been done artfully before. And so as we look around in this moment where people are losing their jobs or opportunities are closing and income is shrinking, I try to keep reminding myself that there are matriarchs and other people in my family who have done this before. Now, I don't always remember how. And so the how is then sitting with members of the Nina Collective and remembering, okay, how do we build? How do we listen to each other? How do we hold each other accountable, right? That's the remembering. The remembering happens when we all get together and do it. But the truth is that all of us sitting here have people who have done the hard things before. Like all of us sitting here have people who have navigated and been traumatized and then had to heal the trauma. So all of us have healing wisdom in our bones. It's just really figuring out like, how do we sit together and take the time to remember and then to apply like what we remember. Even like I remember we came in on the Zoom And Jacqueline just kind of like acknowledged that I was on the floor, and even that is healing energy, right? So she affirmed me, like, look, I'm where I got to be because this is where I got to be. And then having, you know, a sister be able to affirm me, like, that's the remembering, right? That she's like, it's okay, young man, that you're on the floor, because that's what you need right now. And so being in community where we can do that with and for one another is really important. um yeah.
Yeah, this is so beautiful. I think we've said that word
Mhm.
15 times already. But and the hearts going up across the screen are also
Yeah.
like echoing that
Yeah.
beauty and that resonating. And the chat is live, and I do love the chat.
Yeah.
Um, I'm over here thinking to myself, how often our youth are, you mentioned them dancing, and I
Mhm.
just saw it like visually in
Mhm.
my mind. And then I thought about you, you know, leaving the teacher's lounge and like watching them. And so how often joy as practice is individually cultivated in spaces that aren't shaping it. And I'm curious, as we think about joy as the infrastructure for justice or as the emotional infrastructure, if we wanted to build that practice that you named, that individuals and small groups into like organizational culture or practice, where would you invite organizations to begin?
Um, I would, and I'm making a distinction here, but I would invite organizations to begin at a point of lightness. And so I would probably ask members of that organization, when is the moment in space or time where your organization feels the lightest? You know, is it in the morning when everybody's coming to work and everybody is saying hello? Is it the moment where everybody laughs at a shared memory at lunch? Is it the moment when you've just completed a difficult project and people are hugging? Like, when is it that your organization feels the lightest? Because that's the moment that we work on observing and replicating, right? And so then we have to dissect that moment. Okay, what's happening in this moment? Okay, every time we finish a big project together, everybody hugs and we celebrate. Let's think about what that looks like. Let's think about how that goes. Let's think about the 1 hour before that. Let's think about the 1 hour after that. Let's think about who was there, who we invited, who we excluded. You know, like, let's think about all of those things. And then we really work on architecting more of those moments. You know, I'll give you a concrete example. The best moment always in my classroom is the moment where the kids are coming in and they're getting their materials. And I make it a point to go and just kind of like, even if I cannot verbally check in, to like check in with my eyes. So I walk around the room and I make eye contact with everyone. And so before I start my lesson, I've made eye contact with 28 people. And that moment often feels the lightest. No one is arguing, you know, like no one's yelling. That moment often feels the lightest. So I think about, okay, how then do I take this moment, this 90 seconds that happens once per period, and how do I expand this across the duration of a class period or across a school day? And so I had to sit with some friends, just like we're sitting together now. And I had to say, here's this moment that feels really beautiful for me in the classroom. And I want more of this feeling. Right. And so I sat with my friends and they're like, wait, so you walk around the room and you make sure that you make eye contact with everybody before you start teaching? I'm like, yeah. And so one of my friends said, well, right there, you're ensuring that everybody is seen. So within 90 seconds of them entering the room, every human is seen. And so we have to think about how we might replicate that. And then they're like, and so you're walking around the room. Oh, and they're like, oh, and then you're bodily present, right? And so you're bodily present. So every young person feels your presence as you move around the room. And so I had to change my pedagogy. So my friends had to help me understand that, oh, okay, if this 90 seconds goes great for you and you want more of this feeling, you have to be more bodily present in the classroom. So I got rid of my desk. So I no longer sit at the desk as a teacher. I put the desk and I have the janitors take it away. And so now I move around the classroom because my organization, my classroom, feels best when the kids feel my presence, right? And so and then I had to think about, okay, eye contact. When kids feel literally seen, they feel better in a classroom. And so so one of the things that I do is right before I teach the lesson, I invite anyone who feels too far away to move to the front of the room. And I have nice pillows and cushions in the front of the room that they can use to sit on. So if you're feeling too far away, you're sitting in the back and you want to move to the front and sit on a comfortable pillow. And so overwhelmingly, people elect to sit on the comfortable pillows and they're closer to me. I can see them, right? They're seen. And so this idea that I had to say, okay, here's 90 seconds that goes really great. The rest of the day, not so good. And how do I amplify this 90 seconds by sitting with people and really studying this 90 seconds? And so with organizations, I would do the same thing. What is the time in our organization that feels the most powerful, where people are most connected? Let us study this time. Let's think about who's there, how we got there, how we create this time, and then how we use those things that we learn from studying this specific time to form organizational rituals and patterns that govern how we spend our entire days. Yeah.
That is so beautiful and intentional too, and
Mm-hmm.
how you are, let me just go back to um, the frame around being scientists, right? Like you're
Yeah.
speaking to even the science of
Yeah.
being in community with
Yeah.
your students, right? Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
science around that
Yeah.
and making visible all the pieces that otherwise it would not be noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you have brought to my life and to my practice is the persistence on the counterculture, right? Even in the example you're using,
Yeah.
the language you're using, like
Yeah.
I'm sure it was not easy to get your desk out of the room because people have questions.
Yes.
You're doing something different. Why are you
Mm-hmm.
doing that? And
Yeah.
as an educator for folks that are not educated, I'm sure
Yeah.
it's a very relatable example
Mm-hmm.
because educators are the first sort of power of authority that we have, like as
Mm-hmm.
a young person. So
Yeah.
there is a there is sort of the space between young people and educators that we as educators are
Yeah.
taught to instill and remind young people that that
Yeah.
actually is the thing that we want to do. And you're saying, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, that's not what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Right? We're gonna actually remove all those barriers and practice something different and be able to see young people in their full selves.
Yeah.
Um, what else would you say about this practice of counterculture, and this practice of disruption of
Yeah.
what we know and are familiar
Yeah. When we think about counterculture and disruption, what really, and I think our best weapon, and I'm going to continue speaking like a scientist, is data, right? The data that we collect, right? That lots of times folks like us get together and we engage in countercultural movements because it's what we know, it's in our DNA. But we also live in the West, right? And so I often think, how do I communicate with the structures that have historically excluded or oppressed me? And so I think data is a really important way to communicate. And so, for example, even in the classroom, a lot of children with me choose to sit on the floor because they're closer to me, they feel seen. There's a nice, comfortable couch that I've provided for them, a nice cushion. And so I'll say, if you feel far away from this lesson and you really cannot invest, and you want to be closer so that you can invest more, come sit on this cushion. And so sometimes a school leader will come and say, wait, you've got 4 kids sitting on a cushion on the floor. How is this school? Why aren't they in their desk? Or you've got, 3 kids leaning on a pillow when they should be sitting up in the chair, right? How is this learning? And so one of the things that I had to get used to doing was I had to get used to collecting my data. And so every time the kids did a project, I would, keep extra copies of the project. Every time they were working on something, I would videotape their conversations. And so when people started to say, are they really learning in that room? I had lots of evidence to show, yes, we are learning, right? And so when we are seeking to reimagine organizations, we reimagine them and we execute, but then we also collect data. So to say, all right, we were this productive before, we have instituted these 3 new practices. Now look at how much more productive we are. Or we were this communicative before, we've instituted these new practices. Look at how much more communication is happening. So being able to show people as a result of this new thing that I have introduced to the classroom ecosystem, here is how much more productive kids are. As a result of this new thing that we are practicing in our organization, here's how much more people are communicating. So being able to, because I think the hardest part of being in countercultural movements or systems is then remembering that we still have to communicate with power, right? And so I think being able to be involved and fully invested in countercultural movements, but still being able to maintain the ability to communicate with power is really important. So the ability to collect and to keep data in many ways has kept me safe in organizations and institutions that are not safe. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You brought to us to the space of like speaking to power. Like when people
Yeah.
say to you, like, we're not going to recover from whatever, it's like, what is our data, right? What is the
Hmm.
evidence that we're
Yeah.
not going to be able to? And what I heard you say to me last year and what
Yeah.
I'm hearing again
Yeah.
today
Yeah.
is that we have enough evidence to say
Yes.
we have been here.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
as a humankind, as a society, we have been in
Yeah.
at the edge of destruction and dehumanization, and we
Hmm.
can go through this again. So
Yeah.
just being able to like uh understand that this is a cyclical moment and that
Yeah.
cycle is just going to continue to cycle.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying there is really, really important. And I want to kind of make sure that this gets said clearly, is that destruction is not an event, it is part of a process, right? Even the earth itself destroys things every winter, and then every spring, those things are recreated, right? And so when communities, when organizations, when whole peoples find themselves um, at this point of destruction, I always want to remind people this point of destruction is a moment in a much larger process. That, my favorite celebration is right now in the spring, like literally watching the earth come back to life after a winter where things were destroyed, right? And so when I think socially, we're in this moment where so many things have been destroyed. Even like yesterday, I was talking to my two children, and we were talking all about this political moment, and they were like, "How does it feel to be in this moment?" And I was like, I think it's important practice for us to be in historical moments like this one. Like we have to practice what it feels like to be in this moment and to work through these moments so that when these moments come again, we have tools. And I absolutely mourn the evaporation of rights, and I absolutely mourn the loss of life. And I recognize how serious historical moments like this can be. And I also recognize how serious our preparation for resistance must be. And part of that preparation is recognizing that these moments of utter and really heartbreaking destruction are points in a process. That these moments don't last forever, and they don't last forever because we learn from them. Um, Now, if we suffer through these moments and we don't learn from them, then they can last forever, right? But we suffer through these moments and we learn from them. We take notes, we hold our people tight, and that's how we move forward. The great ancestor Toni Morrison, talked about the role of literature and of storytelling, and she's like, "This is how civilizations grow. This is how we heal from harm." Right? That we learn from these moments and we document these moments. And so I think that especially in our role as people who exist in learning spaces, the role of the documentarian is critical, right? When we think about, empires, right? Empires have always kind of crushed the will of humanity. And when we think about, some of the largest empires, so the Roman Empire, right? Like, what is the first thing they burn? They burn libraries, right? Like they take away ancestral knowledge, right? And so I think it's really important in moments like this where we think about how are we learning, and then applying that learning. It's no coincidence that the first thing this regime has done is take away people's power to share books with children, right? Again, because what do they want to take away from us? The ability to learn and apply learning. That, like, I've always believed, and that's why I'm an educator, that learning is the antidote to empire.
Ananda knew about you. We didn't know about you. And Ananda told us about you, but we didn't fully understand. And so we're all being, I think, collectively blown away right now. And I think sometimes organizations are, or individuals or parents even might encounter you and say, wow, he's just a great teacher. And so I'm curious, as all of us in this space are, you're preaching to the choir, we're all practitioners trying to move this work forward. How do we continue to build our toolbox, our muscle in becoming, so that
Yeah.
we can show up and say, "Oh, I notice Alia uses her hand." How do we cultivate these practices so that we can implement the change that we're all trying to transform?
And I'm going to say something a little bit risky here, but I think we have to be willing to make public mistakes and learn from those mistakes in public. I think as much as I have succeeded in life, I have failed spectacularly. Um, and because I work with young people, much of my failure happens with an audience of 28. And I think in the last 10 years, um, it can sometimes feel like those who are invested in resistance are almost in this like wokeness competition. And I've had to remind myself that this is not a competition. This is not a race. I will make profound mistakes. I will be ashamed of myself. People in my community will be ashamed for me and with me. And I have to recover and learn and grow. I think if I never allow myself time and space for mistakes, I don't grow, right? And so I think it can sometimes feel like there is no room for mistakes, like we have to be perfect. I remember, I came up in the South, right? And so I remember people saying to me, because you're a Black boy, you have to go to school and be perfect. You can't make any mistakes because those people are expecting you to fail. And so I built this paradigm for myself where I was trapped, where I was so afraid to make any mistakes, lest somebody think less of me. But when you don't make any mistakes, you don't learn, right? And so I think the best gift that I have given myself as a human is permission to make mistakes and permission to learn in public. And this goes against every shred of my upbringing, because my upbringing is Black, Southern, don't make no mistakes in front of them people. Um, and 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 I've really had to say, but if I don't make any mistakes, then I am really robbing myself of the ability to learn and to grow. Yeah.
And to be human. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Yeah.
bringing the full expression of your humanity. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for also
Yeah.
humanizing this beautiful experience virtually. And thank you so much for sharing your practice of human-centered approach. Any last words as we are wrapping our time?
I think I just have to extend gratitude to all of you. Like you all are really doing it. At times like this work can feel incredibly lonely. We are all deeply invested in community spaces. And it's hard to be a leader in the streets and then you go home to your apartment by yourself. Or it's hard to lead whole groups or organizations and then you get back to your dinner table and you're microwaving your pasta by yourself, right? Like those things are really like difficult. So to have spaces like this where people can come together and study and say, hey, we are all working in our corners of the globe, but we are not doing this work alone. I'm just so thankful for all of your energies and for all of your efforts. And so just like, thank you all for being torchbearers. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cornelius.
Yeah.
Check out the book, We Got This. Thank you all for joining us for the choir conversation of the Nina Collective. If this resonated, we invite you to stay connected with us and continue
Absolutely.
building the practice that help us rebuild together.
And I will echo that. Please stay connected. Please, please, please. We always have these meetings and people are like, yo, we're gonna be friends, we're gonna connect, we're gonna call you. And then y'all get back to life and things get busy and y'all don't call. So please, please, please know that all of this works because we are in this together. We cousins. So
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us on Another Way is Possible. If something sparked in you today, an idea, a memory, a question, hold on to it. share it, let it ripple. This work is ongoing, and it's work we do better together. To learn more, join our community of practice, explore the full 5-year brief, or connect with us at ninacollective.com. And if today's episode moved you, consider sharing with someone who needs a reminder that change is not only possible, it's already happening. Until next time, stay rooted, stay connected, and keep imagining another way is possible.